then, so that you would have that record, so it would be just, if I came from Manhattan into Nassau, you stopped me, you'd know that Denise Ford is
Correct.
from,
Yep.
you know,
We
like.
can record it all. We can
over
separate the
areas
two out.
somewhere,
Not a
whatever,
problem.
okay. All right, and then, so then when you give us the data on the breakdown of what the traffic stops, if you could pull everybody who doesn't live in Nassau County that you stop.
I take 35% out, I give you a different analysis than the remaining 64%.
But you know, I don't want to belabor this, but I mean, one of the confusing things is that then, if you stop somebody, I mean, we have a lot of people who come into Nassau County that have summer homes, or they live elsewhere, but they also have homes, and they live in Nassau County as well. So, but their licenses may say, like, you know, you might have people who live in Queens, but yet they rent homes in Nassau County, like in Long Beach. We have a lot of summer people that come down, but they don't live in Nassau County. So if your offices stop them.
In the world of analysis, you can keep spinning on to more and more and more requests. It never ends, because there's another way that you can break something down out and spin it in the way it is. I understand exactly what Susan is asking for. We can make it happen.
Okay, all right, and we'll start from there, okay?
Yeah, next time I'll ask for everything broken down by precinct, so I'll be back.
Okay. Looking forward. Scott Kaufman? Just when you come up and say your name and your address, please.
Hello, I'm Scott Kaufman. I live at 12 Eric Court in Huntington, New York. I have a couple of questions in 3 different buckets. So one is around body cameras and de-escalation. So the questions there are all of the reviews of the body camera footage happening within the police departments by either the supervising officers or whomever is responsible for reviewing those? And if so, how are they actually being held accountable to making sure that they're reviewing those in a sufficient way and making the right recommendations to the Attorney General and the District Attorney? Particularly as it's probably clear that it reflects pretty poorly on the supervising officers if they have officers under them that are doing things that are sort of against policy. So how is that accountability being done? How are they making sure that that those processes are actually functioning and working correctly? The second category of questions I have is around community input, which I think you discussed. My question there is, I understand that there's these sort of park, walk and talk policies and these different things that you're doing. You're going to these different churches and mosques and synagogues, etc. How are those being reflected in the policies that you're actually implementing? And specifically, I think within the plan that you laid out, you had talked about community input into actual training and policies. Where are we seeing that community input being reflected in the policies and the trainings that you've laid out? And in particular, beyond the training, where in the policies are we actually seeing that community input laid out? And then the third set of questions I have is around Operation Natalie, specifically where opioid overdoses are being mapped to petty larcenies. So can you describe why that mapping is being done and what exactly that is intending on doing? So basically, are we making a connection between geographic proximity to crime and overdose incident? What are the specific connections as far as contact with overdose sites? Can your officers enter overdose site households? So that's my third set of questions. And then lastly, do you have specific success criteria by which you're actually measuring the outcomes of the things you're describing? So you laid out a lot of data. Great, seems reasonable. What are we actually supposed to take away from that? Are those success criteria measured against, for example, reduction in incarceration, or is it specifically only things like arrests? And also, are those success criteria actually targeted toward any level of racial equity or racial bias? Because it's, again, the data is a lot of it, but it's not clear to me how you're actually determining whether or not you're successful in what these plans are meant to do.
All right, thank you. I just want to say, like, with the data, and I'm not going to take away from you, Commissioner Ryder, but I know that for us, the important thing when we did the police reform plan last year was to incorporate this data into the plan so that we have it, because we didn't have it in previous years. So it is a lot of information that we received, and I believe that it's like the benchmark where we're starting. Because now we have this, we know how many stops, where their stops are, who are they stopping, why are they stopping, what is the makeup of the person, male, female, so forth and so forth. So I think that that's why, when you look at this data, to me, I look at it, but now I'm going to look to see in 6 months, what does it look like as compared to what I'm looking at now. So data will be a tool that we can use to see based on the traffic stops that the officers are using. I don't know if I responded correctly or not,
No?
but also, I guess even with the body cameras, who actually does?
So body cameras, there's 4 supervisors that look at it every day. They can't look at every video in its entirety, it's nearly impossible, right? Because you'd be duplicating 177 officers, several hours of body cam to 4. I need another 177 for 8 hours to look at their work. So what happens is, they pick and choose randomly 10 people a day. That's that level. Every arrest is looked by the commanding officer of the precinct. There's roughly 30 to 50 arrests in the county, more closer to 30 these days. And if there's 30 arrests, it's reviewed by the supervisor and the commanding officer of the precinct. The chief of patrol looks at it. But forget all of that. That's our internal side. It gets handed to the defense counsel. He gets the whole video. So if he's got a problem, we're going to hear it. So there's absolute oversight is given right to the person who has been arrested. So they get the full video.
They didn't have it.
Excuse me?
They didn't have that video.
That's correct. You're 100% right. Now they get it all.
Sorry, I'm a defense attorney, so yeah, they didn't have that video before, and now they have that video well before trial. So it's not just about internal checks and balances. People who benefit from this video have it in their possession.
And I, again, as I said earlier, if I saw something like, oh, I gotta change it, I can't. There's no way. It's locked down. There's a footprint on everything. So for body cameras, the oversight is not only from internal, it's external. And if the AG wanted something, she gets the body camera in its entirety. Nothing gets cut out. We can't. She'll know it all. If anything's touched or manipulated, it's automatically logged in. As far as the community and complying and stuff like that, that's what we did before reform. The question's kind of rhetorical. We're going back to before reform. We met those 270 meetings that we had, and we met with the PAC, and we met with several other community leaders that helped us develop reform. Not that everybody's like this, we understand that, but it was developed, and it was approved by this legislative body, and it was approved by the governor of New York. So again, it came back. So we did take that in. As far as the reporting and how we're gonna help, it's every 6 months. That's part of the plan. We promise to come back and tell you everything. And if something like, as Ms. Goddard is asking, sure, no problem, we'll give you that data next time. Again, we were pushed up to this date of the 27th. I'm still a couple of days before it. I had to get people working on the weekend to get the data done. It's a massive undertaking to create a report like this on top of doing everything else. But we do it, we report it, and if something needs to be changed, we'll take a look at it.
I have a question, though, going back to Legislator Solage, when he was talking about there's a group of mothers in his neighborhood that are very angry that their sons sounds crazy, but what if I was one of those mothers and my son had 5 tickets, I'm like, why are they picking on you? Does the mother have to hire a lawyer, or can somebody, if she makes a complaint, to think that her son is being picked on? Can a mother call up the precinct and say, I have an issue, I'd like to know what's going on, why is my son being picked on? Can a mother look at the video?
100% yes. You don't have to wait till it goes. You make it the complaint, and that mother, listen, we'd be happy to show you the video if it turned out, that this is what happened. The video is going to show what the violation, that interaction. That's why in Freeport's situation, I think their complaints dropped by almost 40–50%. Because you come in, okay, no problem, we'll play the video. The video shows it never happened. So again, but I think also in Legislator Szalage's point, and I get it, is that's the concern, is that we're not focusing on communities and stuff. And you saw by the overall numbers, we're not. We've done a great job adjusting and getting back to something that's good.
Did he answer you? I think it pretty much,
I
right?
think that pretty much answered it. I mean, I think the question on success criteria is still lingering. I understand that you're collecting a lot of data and that's the point, right? But the idea of what that data is actually intended to show or why we're collecting it or what we expect to see from the policies is a little bit wishy-washy.
And you can always reach out to us, like, you know, we did read and we will follow up with the police commissioner and try to get as much information as possible, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy Joseph, please.
Sorry, the last thing is around Operation Natalie. I realized that I don't think that was answered.
You're right. I'll answer real quick. Operation Natalie, as many of you know, is a multi-pronged approach towards overdoses. It's gotten blown up in the last 14, 18 months because of COVID. We haven't been able to really, and we're losing the battle on our overdoses. Kids are dying every day. We map our overdoses by community. Again, that shows us where we gotta go. And this legislation passed a bill that we must publicly post that. We publicly post that. We overlay it on top of small crimes like loss vis morto, because 100% the person in need of the substance is if he can't afford it, is going to steal for that substance. And we know that for a fact. And so that's what that data does. It educates us on where to put the cops on the dot and bring them into that focused deterrence that was asked for in the reform plan, to focus in there and find out how we can, again, arrest it. But I will say this, because of bail reform, and this is not a shot at bail reform, but understand it, my top crime that walks out the door and never gets to go to see a diversion court is an overdose, is a person that's arrested for possession of drugs. They don't ever get into the system. And the system with diversion court was working. We were working with them. We had her down 30% our overdoses. And now that it's the drug dealer and the drug seller, the drug buyer gets an appearance ticket at the station house. The drug seller, 90% gets an appearance ticket at the station house or goes to the court and gets let out with no bail the next morning. What happens? Drug buyer, drug dealer, meet up again, and then we get the overdose. That's why we're losing this battle right now. It's because we don't get them into the system. Now, this is not a fight about bail reform. I need to find out how I get that kid help without letting him walk back out the door. That's a problem.
When bail reform was being implemented in New Jersey, there were a number of substance abuse advisors who were against bail reform for that same very reason. If someone overdoses or almost overdoses, they need to spend the next night in jail instead of going back in the street and just trying to really overdose. So that was a concern in New Jersey when bail reform was implemented, and perhaps you could use some of the data you have to make policy recommendations to prevent that for our youth from overdosing.
Thank you.
Well, if I could ask a question on that, Madam Chair. I mean, is it a policy issue from the police department standpoint, or you're not permitted to actually
We are not
hold
permitted.
them overnight?
We cannot, on someone with a buyer, on a small possession, we cannot hold them even for arraignment the next day. A dealer, sometimes we can, but the dealer, no discretion, the judge has zero discretion on this, lets the dealer walk out after he just sold heroin to your child, and that child may overdose the next day with it.
So if you want to be able to keep somebody under the influence over, you need not a policy recommendation, but a substantive reform or bail reform. It actually has to be amended.
100%. They used to go and we all know Judge Sullivan. Judge Sullivan used to get all of these diversion cases. And a kid would walk in the next morning in front of Judge Sullivan and they'd say, okay, here's your choice. You can go the criminal route or you can go and get help. If you choose to go this direction, we'll wipe your criminal record out in 6 months to a year. And that's all this is about, is getting the kid help. But now that's not done. Now we give an appearance ticket, we'll see you in 14, 21 days. 21 days, we'll see you in 21 days. What happens to somebody that's on
Doesn't even see a judge.
Doesn't even see a judge. Gets a ticket by my sergeant at the desk and says, see you in 21 days, no bail. So he goes out and he goes and he buys more drugs and he overdoses and he dies.
And can you tell me, Commissioner, how many drug dealers have been released in the last year because on no bail?
I don't.
Quantify the drug dealer.
I can only tell you how many
Somebody gets
people.
arrested for
Yeah,
Distribution and sale, with intent to sell.
So I can only tell you, and I have it broken this way, is controlled substance, those who were arrested for controlled substance, 1,778 walked out of jail with walked out of station house with nothing, no bail.
Yeah, are we able to break it down as far as how many of those are possession versus how many of those are
Yeah, I can.
possession with intent to sell?
Yeah. A drug dealer does not, a B felony does not, is cashless bail. A B felony drug dealer who sells that pill to your child who dies, not identified yet, obviously, because that'd be a different charge, but he walks out.
This is not a bail reform hearing, I believe, correct?
Right, I was just gonna say that maybe what we'll do is Steve will follow up with, yeah.
It's a statistic in the report, and you've been asking about bail reform questions the whole day.
But we-
You are.
We were asking about
Excuse me,
Operation.
what we will do is, I think, Steve,
Where's your,
excuse me, I'll be with you in a second. Commissioner Ryder, would you be able to, as you are adjusting your reports and the information that you're putting into it, whether or not people are residents, non-residents, also with the drug arrests, whether or not, can we identify whether or not the person who has been arrested was arrested because they were selling the drugs, or if they were arrested because they were